Welcome. We are live here in Washington, D.C. at America First Policy Institute for a 2-year celebration anniversary of the Abraham Accords. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Brian Glenn here live once again at America First Policy Institute. This is a part of their speaker series that we have been covering the last year or so that really addresses several topics that's going on in the world today. We're going to have Mark Lauder come up here and join us here in a few minutes and talk about what we can expect today. But we're going to be talking about the historic agreement between Israel and the United Arabs and the Middle East. It was essentially bringing peace in the Middle East, and that is called the Abraham Accords. And we're going to talk about the impact on the world, the impact that it's had here in this country, and really the amount of peace that it's brought in that region of the world, adversely to what's going on in other parts of the world. And of course, under the presidency of President Donald J. Trump, we had world peace. We had peace in the Middle East, and he was one to bring all of that together. So we're glad you're joining us, and whatever platform you're watching us on, thank you so much. We are happy to be able to bring this content to you today. We want to remind everybody, if you want to download our app, you got to simply go to your Apple, your Android store, and download our app. It's absolutely free to do so. So we're going to be the event today kicks off at around 11:30. It's right behind me. We've got a group of probably about 75 to 100 chairs in this room, from what I understand. We'll let you get a quick shot of that. From what I understand, it is well, it's been RSVP'd out. This room will be filled. The doors just opened here slightly a few moments ago for guests to come in, but you've got several guest speakers lined up for today. You've got people, Joni Ernst will be here. Linda McMahon will speak as well. Jared Kushner, who is basically over the Abraham Accords Institute. We'll talk a little bit about this, but it's really about going over and trying to understand the impact that this agreement had on the world, and in fact, as far as being the driver for peace in the Middle East. But we're glad you're joining us, and remember, you can also go follow us on all of our social media platforms. Make sure you subscribe to us on our Rumble page. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Truth Social as well. Now, on a side note, there is a lot of media here for this event today. Now, we have had the opportunity to cover very different topics from the speaker series here at America First Policy Institute, and the media coverage sometimes has not been as much as it is today. Today, there's a lot, and I don't know if it's on purely speculation that perhaps President Donald J. Trump will make an appearance here. I don't know that. Can't confirm that. Can't deny that. We don't book his schedule. But if you probably noticed in the news this morning that there was, he is in the D.C. area, so we don't know the purpose of that visit, but maybe that might be one of the reasons why we have a little bit added level of press interest in this building today. We don't know that. But if we went over some of the things that the Abraham Accords did, and we'll bring Mark Lauder on here in just a second, it really was the olive branch to world peace, and in that region of the world. You have United Emirates, you had Israel, you had really just a mutual understanding of their differences and how they should work together and come together as culturally speaking to understand each other's differences and perhaps some of the things they do agree on. And that's one of the things that they were able to bring people together under the Trump administration. And of course, Jared Kushner was a big part of that, and we'll hear from him today as well. But we're glad that you're joining us, and of course we'll get with Mark Lauder here in a few minutes to talk a little bit more about what the mission of America First Policy Institute is all about. Actually, Mark's joining us right now. I have you come on in here. I was just setting up the fact that this seems like the interest level for this particular topic is big. We've had other topics that we've covered, and it's been a great turnout. But today, there's a lot of interest in what we're going to talk about.
I think there really is, and it's really great to see this big of a crowd here and getting here early. In fact, I think it does show the excitement. I think the Abraham Accords is probably one of the greatest accomplishments in foreign policy, not just of the Trump administration, but of our country in recent decades. It really was a fundamental changing of how America approached Middle East peace, and it works. much like so much else what the former president did.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the world under the Trump administration compared to what the world looks like under the Biden administration. It is a drastic difference. It's a leadership. It's strength through leadership. You got to be strong and use some force, and that worked under the Trump administration.
Well, and I think one of the greatest things about the Abraham Accords, which obviously under the leadership of the president, Jared Kushner, who we'll be seeing here later this morning, was that it was a fundamental rethinking of how do we approach Middle East peace. For 40 years, under Republican and Democrat administrations, most of Middle East peace revolved around Israel and Palestine, and you were on one side or the other. And what I think the Abraham Accord showed was that let's deal with our commonalities. And there are so many countries that don't need to have, while they may have ideological differences or religious differences, that doesn't have to be the defining moment. We can be friends and confront our common threat, which is Iran, and stop viewing Israel as the common threat. And now you see countries like the United Arab Emirates, you see Bahrain, Morocco, Jordan, Egypt, all coming together, removing tariffs, working together with the state of Israel, and dealing with Middle East peace from what can we accomplish together. And if the Palestine question wants to come into play, then they need to have, to make the changes. We're not telling you what those changes are, but this is your opportunity to make those changes to join the larger community.
Mark Lauder joining us here on the pre-show, building up to the start of this, which is 11:30 here locally. Let's go into some of the speakers that we're going to hear from. Honestly, the Honorable Jared Kushner is going to speak, but so is Linda McMahon.
Linda McMahon, you're going to have ambassadors on the stage. You'll have obviously a lot of former leaders in the foreign policy establishment that were along with the president and his team. So, I mean, this was really a team effort, but I think it shows the strength of the team that was brought together by the president, by Jared Kushner, and I think that's one of the reasons why you see Jared here today to join with America First policy to celebrate this, because we've got to look at the Abraham Accords not as a singular moment, a singular document. It's really a mindset, but it's also a mindset carrying forward today. Even if there is another administration, even if they're trying to go back to the failed policies of the past, these countries are now thinking about things differently, approaching each other differently. So I think that's what you're going to see from a variety of different speakers today, each highlighting how this changed not just their worldview, but really how all nations should be working together. It's
interesting, Mark, because as we talk to followers and Trump rallies and things like that, I'll always ask them, what are some of the greatest accomplishments under the Trump administration? A lot of them say he moved the embassy to Israel. He did something that no other leader, no other president said. They said they were going to do it, but they never did. He did it, and I think that really stands out.
I really do, too, and I think it's one of the things, I think you and I have talked about this in the past. So one of the reasons why I think Donald Trump was elected in 2016 was because you had people on both sides of the aisle who were just sick and tired of being lied to by politicians from both sides of the aisle. Because you had every president since Clinton running on the fact that they were going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. They'd signed the law. But then the national foreign policy establishment were basically telling, no, you can't do this. This is going to cause war in the Middle East. And Donald Trump said no. And by the way, it didn't cause war in the Middle East. It didn't do any of these things that the so-called foreign policy establishment feared. It actually set the stage for we're going to approach things differently and we're going to get the job done.
If you remember when President Trump said he was going to visit North Korea, the media, the left, everyone went crazy and said he's going to start a nuclear war. He's going to go over there and start. That obviously did not happen. I think the strength that President Trump showed as far as national security and really developing peace around the world is something that we desperately need right now. But North Korea is a great example of that. He went over there to visit Young Jong, and
I think it's one of the great examples, because so much of foreign policy is like, well, you're going to give legitimacy to this leader or that regime or not. That's not my choice. I don't get to say who the leader of another country is, nor should they be saying who our leaders are. So we will deal with those people. We'll deal with them from a position of strength. But we also have to stop telling other countries what they must be doing. We can have our standards. We can have our expectations if you want to be a partner with the United States. And I think that was what you saw in North Korea. You saw that in the dealings with China. You see it in the dealings with the Middle East. You're also seeing it with Iran, where you have this current administration going back on all of those failed policies that President Trump righted, and they're going to go back and just do the same old failed thing again.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that's one of the pillars here at America First Policy Institute. It's about it's international foreign policy. It's, of course, it's all domestic economic strength, things like. To go back and undo these things, is so detrimental to our country. And we're seeing that as far as oil. We're now bending a knee to countries that we're trying to buy oil from them, when at one point we were 100% energy independence, which is huge. Let's talk about how crucial and how detrimental it is right now for this administration that we have now that goes back and undoes all of these things that President Trump laid out.
No, and you see it playing out on the world stage right now, whether it's the botched, Afghanistan withdrawal, which President Trump set the stage for a successful into that campaign and withdrawal. The Biden administration pulled the plug on it, did their own thing, and we saw what happened, which also then prompted Russia to invade Ukraine. I mean, let's remember, there is only one president this century where Russia did not invade one of its neighbors. That was during the administration of Donald J. Trump. There was a reason for that, because he knew that America was strong. He knew that we were safer when America is strong, and we project that strength. I mean, let's go and let's look to see what's going on in Europe right now. They are scrambling under the sanctions and energy of Russia, which Donald Trump told them not to do. Don't build Nord Stream 2. What did this administration do? They lifted the sanctions on it. Well, they took away the Keystone Pipeline. They enabled Nord Stream 2. Now you see East Europe, all of a sudden in an economic crisis because Russia is now controlling their energy supply, the exact same thing Donald Trump told them not to do.
I read an article just yesterday that was going to criminalize if you left your AC below a certain point over in Europe. It was now a crime if you were to do that. That's the energy crisis that they're in over there. And of course, President Donald J. Trump warned that this would happen, just as to your point. Let's talk about Trump's in town. And I said this earlier. We have no idea why he's in town. We don't book his schedule. We have no idea. But it does have. He didn't ask. There is a certain buzz in this city, though, right now. That's from leaving my hotel to come here and being in this room right now, that the greatest president of our lifetime and probably the most polarizing human being on this earth is in D.C. right now. There's something special about that.
It always is. I mean, the fact that, I don't ever recall a former president, getting that much energy, that much buzz, and just coming back here to this city for, obviously I'm not sure what he's doing today, but, I think it shows that America's crying out for leadership. And I was talking the other day, I was doing an interview on another network, and they were talking about how polarizing, and they talked about how the president was polarizing. But I said, you look at the America First agenda, which we're out there in town hall meetings. I was in Cincinnati on Friday hosting a town hall. Every issue in that agenda is an 80-20, 70-30 issue. It's not polarizing. People want lower gas prices. They want the inflation gotten control of. They want security at the border, election integrity, a strong national defense. Crime.
Yeah, right.
It's not polarizing. And when you talk to the American people about it in such a way that you don't say America First or Donald Trump or Joe Biden, if you deal with the issues, they want success. They want answers for these issues. We're providing it. And I think the more and more we're out there doing these events across the country. We've been in Iowa, New Mexico, Ohio, Pennsylvania. I think we're going to be in North Carolina in a week or so. The more people just hear about the answers to the problems they face, we're giving them the answers they want. Give us a chance. We already proved it worked. Let's do it again. And I think we're going to see that.
If we have some people tuning in right now and you're not familiar with America First Policy Institute, let's get a little bit of backstory on that. Let's kind of unpack some things. Relatively new organization in terms of longevity, but let's talk about the history.
Yeah, I mean, this was really the dream of Brooke Rollins, our president and CEO. She was the head of the Domestic Policy Council in the White House under President Trump. And then obviously when the results of the 2020 election became clear, it was, what do we do with this great talent? All of these great, not just people who think about stuff, but the people who are in the administration alongside the president doing it, putting it into action. So as opposed to spreading out to universities and think tanks and corporations across the country, which is normally what happens when an administration ends, they brought it together here with Linda McMahon, Larry Kudlow, and Brooke to put it all under one roof, and then to prepare the way for the next America First administration, whether that is in Congress in 2023 and hopefully again in the White House in 2025. I was on the campaign in 16. I was on the transition in 17 into the White House. We didn't have a group like this that came ready.
You wish you did.
I wish we did. With the policies, the regulations, the proposed legislation, the stack of resumes of the people who are there and ready to go get the job done. And that's what we're ready to provide, whomever that person will be. We don't know obviously what's going to happen in 2022, and we don't know who is running or who's not running in 2024. But we'll get through that process. And the great thing is whoever gets that leadership spot, whether it's the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, or the President of the United States, we know that they're going to be ready because of the work that's being done at America First Policy Institute.
Mark Lauder joining us on the pre-show here, getting ready to celebrate the second anniversary of the Abraham Accords. And if you're not familiar with that, we'll kind of fill you in throughout the broadcast. A lot of people don't understand exactly what it was called. They just know that Trump provided peace in the Middle East, and that that kind of settled that area and that region of the world that was so volatile. I mean, you got to understand, like that conflict, those disagreements between those countries, it could be very, very dangerous to world peace. But we'll go into that here in a little bit. But to your point, you guys are really laying out a great information tool for people even watching us right now that want to get into public service. We've talked about this before. If you want to run for city council, you want to run for your school board, your website is a great resource for that.
It really is, and we're going to even make it better. But we've got 22 different policy centers on just about anything and everything under the sun that you can think of, and we have an America First leader from inside that administration ready to help lay out those policies. So if you want to run for, from the State House to the White House, you can actually go there, look at those policies, have the academic research behind it, and then tailor make it to your race, to the needs of your community, your state, your neighborhood. And that's where I think one of the great things that Brooke is focusing on is that we are not just a federal think tank. We are not here to just further the needs of Washington, D.C. That's why we're going out there. We're going to do trainings for people who want to run for the state legislature or for city council or for school board, which is so critically important. And if we do that and we help arm you, not only do we get America First policies at every level of government, we also start to build the bench of America First leaders who will then be ready to move from the city council to the state house and then obviously Congress and the White House.
And the best website for that is?
AmericaFirstPolicy.com.
There you go. We'll take a quick check of the time here. We're sitting at 11:17. This thing kicks off here in about 13 minutes. Do we have a chance to get Brooke Rollins? Is she around? Is there anybody that we can...
I'm going to see if I can round her up for you.
Brooke Rollins, before we go in there, real quickly, I want to talk to you about our great patriot that we all support, and that is the great Mike Lindell over at My Pillow. And I want to remind everybody, you talk about a guy that has really led the charge as far as election integrity and to clean up exactly what's going on in the world of politics and as far as our elections. And I just want to remind you that he is a fighter and he needs your help. So go over to the website, mypillow.com, put that promo code RSBN at checkout, and you'll get up to 66% off your entire order. And I always suggest, you got these kids going back to college right now, going back in the dorms. Now is a great time to go fill up your shopping cart with stuff, click on the items that you think that they might want, and just see what that savings looks like. After you put the promo code in there, you load it up, and then voila, it's a lot less expensive than you thought. It's a Giza sheets. It's got a special on those. The mattress topper, the classic pillow, the slippers, even the coffee. The My Coffee that he just rolled out here a few weeks ago. I just encourage you to go check that out over at mypillow.com. Promo code RSBN at checkout to get up to 66% off your entire order. Great patriot, Mike Lindell, great partner of today's program. Let me pan the crowd here real quickly. We've got probably what will be about 75 to 100 people in this room. Now, this is a part of their speaker series, and the last speaker series we were here covering had to do with, I want to believe the food supply issues that the world is struggling with right now. But today it's all about a second year celebration of the Abraham Accords, and that is the peace agreement through the U.S., Bahrain, United Arabs, and the United States, all to basically broker peace to that region. And it's basically an acceptance of cultural acceptance, religious acceptance, and it's just basically bringing people together despite their differences. And so we're going to hear the Honorable Jared Kushner will be here speaking a little bit later, as long as Joni Ernst will be here, Linda McMahon as well, and really looking forward to hearing what they have to say today, because when you look at what's going on in the world today, especially going on in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. A lot of people say, well, under the Trump administration, you didn't necessarily have a lot of that conflict. Matter of fact, you hear President Trump talk about it all the time, that under his administration, we didn't lose military service members. We didn't have that. And of course, the withdrawal in Afghanistan was just one of the worst examples in American history of the failures that we have done. It's a big embarrassment, not only for our military, but for our country and our leaders. So you didn't have those embarrassments under the Trump administration. You didn't have those setbacks that you now have under the Biden administration. And so there is leadership through strength. And a lot of people think that, if your leader is outspoken, if he's forceful, if he likes to flex that strength every once in a while, that's a bad thing. But actually, on the world stage, that's a good thing. It's good to keep your adversaries in check and the people who just clearly want to cause harm to other people. You've got to show strength. That's the only way you can do it. And that's exactly what President Trump did during his administration. He showed strength through all of that. Who's now joining us? Brian Glenn live here on a Monday morning here at our nation's capital. This is one of our several trips back here to D.C. just in the last 3-4 months. The last time we were here, a big event was an AFPI policy summit that President Trump closed out day 2 for that. Various speakers and panels over the course of the 2 days, but we are back here at their headquarters here off of Pennsylvania Avenue. A beautiful day here in the nation's capital, and as Mark Lauder was just talking about earlier, President Trump is in the D.C. area. We don't know the nature of the business. Unfortunately, that information is not available to us, but there's I guess some level of speculation that could he make an appearance here at this event today. Don't know the answer to that. Could be true, could not, who knows. But nevertheless, there is a sense of buzz in here. We've covered a lot of these speaker series, and there is a lot more media here today than there normally is for some of the other ones. But we're glad that they're here, glad they're covering this, glad you guys are joining us here today. And we want to remind everybody, don't forget to download our app. It's on your Apple, your Android store. Go download the app. It's absolutely free. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Go to rsbnetwork.com and click on newsletter. Subscribe. Put a couple things in there. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to sell your information, but we are going to deliver some great content to your inbox. And what Mark was talking about earlier is information is power, especially in this day and age where you've got so many topics, so many divisive topics that are coming up that people want to go battle you and debate you on. You've got to have the information. So sign up for our newsletter, because Grace Saldana, our editor-in-chief, and we've got a great Summer Lane, Alex Caldwell. We have a great staff of writers that write on subjects that are most concerning to you. So I just want to remind everybody, if you could, sign up for the newsletter. We shoot that to your inbox once a week. But it's important that you have this information to be able to have these educated debates with people. And it seems like as we get closer to not only the midterms, which is crucial coming up, less than 60 days away for the midterms, it's very important that we have the information that you need. So the AFPI website's a great resource, and of course our newsletters are as well. Speaking of midterms, we're going to have complete coverage for the midterms coming up here in November. We'll have a crew just about in every swing state that's on the board right now. We'll have a crew there to cover all of that, because this is one of the most important elections of our lifetime. I know that's frequently used quite often about saying, well, this is the most important election of our lifetime. But if we don't take the House, and I mean the House is the minimal here, if we don't take the House convincingly, we're in trouble. So we need the House, the Senate, and of course we need definitely a run for the White House in 2024 in order to save this country. I think we can all agree that the last 2 years just about has been a complete nightmare. Some of the things that the Biden administration has done are things that President Trump said would do, and a lot of Americans didn't believe him. I met a guy here today that basically said he voted for Biden back in 2020 and regrets it. and did not think in a million years that the Biden administration would turn out to be what it is today. And so I'm glad that he's here. Obviously, very much, changed his stance on leadership positions in this country. But it is important to understand just how the spot that we're in right now. Not only economically, I mean, you want to talk about economically, yes, gas has come down in certain parts of the country. Go out to the West Coast, it's still back in the $5, $6, $7 range. In the middle of the country, you're still talking about, low fours, mid threes, and even low threes in certain parts of the country. And like on the East Coast, it may be slightly higher than that. So yes, gas prices are so high. And the inflationary rate as far as food, your rent, things like that, production, goods, housing supplies, those are still historically high. But other than that, you're looking at crime, law, and order, and you've got this the last 2 years, really just defund the police movement, which is basically removing officers off the streets of some of the most dangerous streets in America. Cities that are led by Democrats, you're seeing that. And so I think when the voters go to the polls on November 8th, they're not just looking at the economy. They're looking at safety of their family, crime, a decrease in crime, the fight, the all-out assault to remove the criminals off our street, and then our southern border, drugs, human trafficking that's been coming across. We've had nearly 2 million since the Biden administration come across our southern border. Now, we definitely have immigration reform that's needed. We need to change the way that we have people come into this country. And I have a very close personal friend of mine that told me that he's going through the legal channels right now to become a citizen in this country, the legal way, and it's cost him to an excess of $40,000. And that's not guaranteeing that he's going to get accepted on his green card. That is just merely attorney fees and all the other fees associated with applying for that type of green card. So the immigration process has changed. Now, he said if you go back about 10 years ago, the total cost of doing what he's doing now was around $4,000. So what has happened between $4,000 and $40,000, the cost for immigration status? But anyway, things need to happen. Things need to change, and it changes with people going to the polls. So I just encourage everyone right now to, if you want to make a change in your world, please go to the polls on November 8th. And like that, I'll step aside and let you guys see and pan the crowd here real quickly. And we'll see if we can get Brooke Rollins here shortly to come on and take a few minutes with us. Of course, Linda McMahon will be here as well. She is the chairman of America First Policy Institute. This perhaps provide a couple words of what's going on. Quick check of the time here. We're sitting at 11:28. This is slated to start at 11:30. So we'll see exactly if they're running a little bit behind on that. They very well might be. Total run time on this, I've been told, is around 1 o'clock between the speakers and just some of the open comments and things like that. But we're glad that you're joining us today, and it's always good to be back in our nation's capital. As it seems like we don't get here enough, and we like to get here a little bit more than we do now, and we just need to change the administration. And here, and of course, we were here, the Roe v. Wade reversal, and we were here actually in this room going days before, or actually the week before the reversal, because if you recall, the Supreme Court had so many decision days that they had factored into everything. And so, of course, we were here covering that, the right for life. And of course, we were there in front of the Supreme Court the day that Roe v. Wade was handed down, the reversal rather was handed down, and it was a great time to be in D.C. It was a great time to be in our nation's capital. So much going on right now, and it's just great to be here and provide this coverage to you. So I do want to remind you, we started off as kind of a viewer-funded network covering all of the things conservative, all things President Trump, and if you like to pay some conservative dues, you can do that. Go to our website, Feel Led to Give, rsbnetwork.com/donate, rsbnetwork.com/donate. You can click on that safe and secure way to be able to give back to our company and help us cover the events that we're doing today, because we are proud to be able to really be on the forefront of covering everything that's America first, everything that is valued and that you love and trust. That's what we are a part of, and that's the basis of our network, and we just appreciate everyone following us at home on our journey, and of course to subscribe to us on social media as well, across the board. You can follow me as well at Brian on True Social. You can at Brian Glenn on across all of these social media platforms, and of course follow Right Side on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, True Social, Getter. Follow us on all of those as well. It looks like more and more people coming. Let's see if I can find some people, and some noteworthy people coming in here that will be able to give you an idea of who is here. But this is the most people we have seen at the speaker events right now. As far as media coverage and overall interest, and foreign policy is a big part of the success that the Trump administration had during those 4 years. Peace in the Middle East, peace around the world. Of course, North Korea was in there as well, visiting that dictator. A lot of people were critical of President Trump. Went to North Korea, said that he would start, a quote, a nuclear war, end quote, if he did that. We all know none of that ever happened, but it was through his leadership, through the strength of President Trump, that he brought and kept world peace, and that is something that we're just not seeing right now under this Biden administration. We are not seeing the leadership that it takes to not only keep, quote, the bad guys in check, to make sure they absolutely know, what the situation would be if they decide to do something detrimental to the safety and the security of our country. And that's one of the things that we all want. We want to be safe, not only in our schools, not only in our neighborhoods, but we want our country. We want our country to feel safe. We want to know that when our military is deployed overseas, when we're around the world protecting other countries, that we want to make sure that our troops, our citizens, our government workers are safe in these countries. And that's one of the things that President Trump has done such a great job, is showing strength through leadership. And the Honorable Jared Kushner will be speaking here today. He is a part of the Abraham Accords Peace Institute, and he runs that up. So I'm looking forward to hearing from him today as well. I'm also looking forward to hearing from Joni Ertz, veteran, military, finding out his thoughts on all of this as well. This is important that we understand how significant the Abraham Accords were and still are today. Now, this is the second anniversary. Actually, I believe it was August 23rd of 2020 when they were signed. So we're coming up on the 2 years, just shy of, just over 2 years from the initial exact date from all of that. We also remind everybody to make sure you tune in next Saturday, or I'd say this Saturday. We'll be in Ohio for another President Donald J. Trump rally. He's making his way to the great state of Ohio. We want to talk about a lot of candidates that he has endorsed in that state. J.D. Vance is one of them. There's several speakers that are slated for that show. The speakers start at 4 o'clock on Saturday, and of course President Donald J. Trump speaks at 7 o'clock there in Ohio. We'll have complete coverage of the Trump rally on Saturday starting at noon local time, and we'll bring that to you as we typically do. Christina Bobb will be my special guest co-host for that rally. Christina Bobb, Trump attorney, journalist. So much has been involved in the FBI raid, and perhaps we'll get a little bit of an update for that as well. Vanessa Holmes will be there co-hosting with me again, and we're also going to have another special guest that we'll wait to release who that is going to be here shortly as a surprise. But we're glad that you're joining us today. As you see, the room is filling up. People are trying to find their seats as we get ready to kick this thing off. And just want to make sure that you guys are tuned in and obviously subscribe to us on all of our social media platforms, and especially on Rumble. Rumble's been a great partner for Right Side in the last 5, 6, well, really the last year or so, whenever kind of big tech put their finger on censorship and was not only canceling people but shadow banning them as well. And Rumble has really stepped up to provide a great platform for us to, an alternative platform for us to be able to jump on and push out our content. So big special thanks to the guys over at Rumble for doing that. But we definitely want you to follow us on all of our social media platforms. That is one way that we're able to get this information out, not only for anything that's pro-America, but anything that we do in general as far as programming is concerned. And of course, the app is a wonderful way to follow us. And we've had, when we go to rallies, it's, one of the things that we people do. They love to hold up their phones and say, "Look, I've got your app downloaded on the phone. I'm watching you guys right now," and it's just a great resource for that as well. But we're glad you're joining us. It's a little bit behind schedule here today, which is not completely out of the norm when you get this many people to try to assimilate into this area. They've got some lunch provided just off camera for us, so a lot of people are probably just grabbing their lunch. But we should be starting this here shortly, and I want to remind everybody as well that thanks to your generous donations, we're able to continue to provide streams like this. So rspnetwork.com/donate. As the great Larry Elder would say, throw a little something in the tip jar, is what he likes to say, because we certainly appreciate all that you do. And of course, the midterms coming up, we plan on, I would imagine, heading back out to some of these swing states. As we know, we're going back to Ohio this Saturday, and I can only imagine that President Trump will stop back in Arizona at one point. You have a very heated gubernatorial race between Katie Hobbs and the great Kari Lake. And when I say the great Kari Lake, that is in fact true. I mean, we've never find probably more of an America First minded gubernatorial candidate in all the country. Maybe Doug Mastriano there in Pennsylvania, but what a great race that's going to be, and what a great victory that's going to be for conservatives when Kari Lake wins and when Doug Mastriano wins, and how important it is that those states are secured by real conservatives, real Republicans in those respectful races in those states, because those are swing states. And we know what happened in the 2020 election. There was a lot of discrepancies there, a lot of things that we've been able to flush out in the last 18 months, and there's still a lot of work to be done there in terms of that. So if you want to take a look at what's building up to November 8th, let's go ahead and turn our attention to the America First Policy Institute at the Abraham Accords Peace Institute. Just now joining us, we're live here in Washington, D.C., America First Policy Institute for the Abraham Accords Peace Institute, a 2-year anniversary of that. We're glad you're joining us here. It should be starting here momentarily. Probably well over 100 in this room here now. Now this looks like it's the biggest speaker series attendance that we've seen since we started covering this. Obviously, the topic is very globally important to every aspect of our lives, as far as the impact that the Abraham Accords has had, not only in the world but in this country, in regards to trade between the nations. Very important economically speaking, militarily speaking. It's been very important as far as establishing peace, and as far as casualties of war or anything like that. It's been very important in that regards. But we're just a few moments away from this starting, and it looks like more and more people have been filling in to to get this thing kicked off. But we're glad you're joining us, and this is a part of a very special series that they have here at America First Policy Institute, the speaker series. Now, the last one we covered specifically targeted the food shortage on a global scale. It's something that we all should be very, very concerned about, not only here in the U.S., but overseas as well, as the war in Ukraine, the Russia conflict, has really been something that has put it's been a problematic, kind of looking for the right word to say there, in terms of global distribution of food to nations that depended on the food that was coming out of the Ukraine. A lot of grain, a lot of oats, that those would come out into other nations of the world that need it, and that really depend on them. So as far as in terms of importance, they are focusing on topics and speakers that impact our lives. And as Mark said earlier, America First Policy Institute was founded to have basically a resource for people to focus on issues that matters both for Americans. And they have different policies, different structures as far as immigration, education, economics, national security, things like that. So I just encourage everybody, if you want to get more information on that, go to FPI's website and research if you have questions, because it's important that you are armed with the facts to have these educated debates as we move closer to elections and we move closer to different topics that have come up in our world today. It's great to have that information, and that's exactly what they have done here at America First Policy Institute. Also, want to remind everybody, go check out our great friend Mike Lindell over at MyPillow. We've seen college kids go back in this past weekend. You might be moving a college student in right now. Make sure that their dorm is supplied with what they need to get things done. So I know that the sheets, the mattress toppers, the pillows, the slippers, things like that, the towels, I just encourage you to just go over to mypillow.com, put the promo code RSBN at checkout to get up to 66% off your entire order there. You can now, great time to support Mike Lindell. Of course, he's been a great partner of this network for a long time, and I just encourage you to support him as well. We thought we'd see him in Ohio, in Pennsylvania last weekend. I think we're going to see him in Ohio coming up on Saturday. We'll have a few minutes with him, but I just want to encourage everyone to support the great Mike Lindell over at MyPillow, and don't forget to use our promo code RSBN at checkout to get up to 66% off your entire order. Now, when we talk about the Abraham Accords, it was a great document that issued up, some of the things that they needed, which was to continue the dialogue that developed friendly relations among the states and advances the interests of lasting peace in the Middle East. Now, if you take a look at what the Biden administration have done in the last 18 months, it's been the exact opposite of that. We've got the war in Ukraine. We can all probably agree that if President Trump would have been in office, we would not have seen what Putin has done there as far as an invasion to Ukraine. Also, if you're looking at this, the Abraham Accords, it's to promote interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Now, let's talk about that for a second. You talk about interfaith and intercultural dialogue. That's bringing people together that are clearly have a different ideology viewpoint in terms of faith. So to be able to bring people together in a peaceful way is something that only President Trump could do. And it was something through his strength and his ability to negotiate and bring people together, despite their differences culturally, politically, spiritually. So it was one way that he was able to do that. And I'm just kind of watching some of the people that are coming in here right now. I do see Linda McMahon. I don't know if you can probably see her, but she just took her seat moments ago. And hopefully we'll be able to spend a few minutes with her, perhaps after this speaker series today. As a reminder, we were talking about it earlier, that President Trump is in D.C., and this is the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that he's been here since the America First Policy Institute summit that they had just a few months ago. So he is here, and we don't know the nature of his visit here, but you've probably seen the video on social media of him, getting off the plane, being here. We don't know the nature of that. You can see some of the people taking their seat. Jared Kushner greeting others in there right now, saying hello to some of the guests here. When you talk about nations that are being represented here economically, you've got some of the most powerful nations in the world that were involved in this Abraham Accords peace treaty.
Good afternoon, everyone. If I would please take your seats, we're going to get started.
Okay. Another second announcement to take their seats in here, as we're probably just a few minutes away from this starting. You can see Jared Kushner up front speaking to some of the guests. And the Honorable Linda McMahon on the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Is it still morning? Yes, it is. It's not quite noontime. We appreciate everyone taking their seats. Thank you so much. I'm Linda McMahon, and it is certainly my privilege to serve as the chair of AFPI, and I want to welcome all of you here this morning who are here with us in attendance, but also those who are watching via live stream. I do believe all around the world. So we welcome our viewing audience live and on live stream. We're very proud to be here this morning because it's such an auspicious occasion. We are renewing our strength in the Middle East. This is the second anniversary of the Abraham Accords this week, and we're certainly proud to host this event here. It also gives me such special joy to welcome our close friends, Jared Kushner, for one, who will be speaking with us this morning. We also want to recognize and welcome our distinguished guests, especially our featured speakers today. Joining Jared Kushner will be Senator Joni Ernst of the great state of Iowa and co-chair of the Senate Abraham Accords Caucus. John Rakolta Jr., former U.S. Ambassador to the UAE, former National Security Advisor to the President, Robert O'Brien. Robert Greenway, the President and Executive Director of the Abraham Accords Peace Institute. And our very own Carla Sands, Vice Chair of AFPI's Center for Energy and the Environment, and former U.S. Ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. And Bruce Pearl, head coach of Auburn men's basketball team and a champion of the Abraham Accords. We're also honored to welcome our distinguished guests in the audience. We have so many folks with us this morning. We're so happy to have you here. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, as well as the ambassadors of the UAE, Israel, Egypt, Finland, Hungary, and Romania, who are all here with us today. Welcome. This is such an important conversation about one of the most historic and transformative achievements of the Trump administration, not only for the American people, but for the Middle East and for the world. Over the last 2 years, since the Abraham Accords were signed, The Middle East has seen historic diplomatic progress between Israel and the Abraham Accords signatory countries, such as UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco. This progress, which has included first ever visits by dignitaries of these nations, has also significantly improved ties with Israel's broader regional neighbors, particularly Egypt and Jordan. Saudi Arabia has just announced it would open its airspace to all carriers, allowing for more overflights to and from Israel. Very significant. Bilateral trade relations and security ties have been significantly bolstered, which of course advance our security interests in the region. Today's speakers all had front row seats into making these achievements possible, none perhaps more so than Jared Kushner, whose outstanding new book, Breaking History, is truly the authoritative account of not just the Abraham Accords, but the Trump presidency. And he's seen all of it from a bird's eye view. But he saw not only that, but he saw the unique approach of President Trump and his dedication to delivering for the American people. Jared, we are really so delighted and honored to have you with us today. We are also so happy to jointly host this event with your Abraham Accords Peace Institute and the fantastic team that you have assembled there. It is because of the importance of the Trump administration's achievements in the Middle East and the urgent need to build on them and educate about them that we here at the America First Policy Institute are excited today to launch our Middle East project. We are so excited to continue our fast and tremendous expansion in just over a year. And the launch of this line of effort demonstrates how important it is to us and to the American people. Thank you all once again for being here. And it's my distinct pleasure now to welcome to the stage our President and CEO, Brooke Rollins.
How about that Chairman Linda McMahon? Another round of applause for her. She has been such an incredible leader for us. Really remarkable. Thank you all for being here today. Again, my name is Brooke Rollins. I have the incredible honor and privilege of every day leading the America First Policy Institute, along with so many amazing men and women that believe in the vision of America First and believe that what was achieved in the last administration was not the end, but truly the beginning. And building out what that looks like for the next 100 years is what all of us are working so diligently around the clock, 7 days a week, to ensure that we have an America that is safe and secure and prosperous, where opportunity is for all. So again, I thank you so much for being here. It has been a remarkable 500 days for AFPI. We have about 150 staffers, 22 policy centers, boots on the ground in 32 states, not just stopping things we don't agree with necessarily in Washington or educating, but also working on the ground in key states around the country. So for all of you that have been a part of that build, we are so grateful to you and we thank you. I also want to thank our partner today, the Abraham Accords Peace Institute, led by the very capable Robert Greenway. What an awesome opportunity. I think we've done partnerships in the past to all of our friends at AAPI, but this is really the first outward-facing event that we have done in a really big way, and we've got tens of thousands of people watching on live stream. Thank you. An incredible interest from the media, standing in the back of the room and watching live stream. And then, of course, all of you who've joined us here today. It's really an honor to get to do this work and to work alongside you to put forward and celebrate the second anniversary of the Abraham Accords. So let me introduce our featured speaker for today, and what an honor to have him here. You know, a presidential administration, you can say many things about many of them, but there is no doubt that they are a generator of history. There are too many people, too many plans, and too much action to ever be able to be contained in a single sentence, a single video, or even a single book, or even really a single lifetime. But they'll be writing books about the Trump first term for generations to come. The story of how one administration accomplished more in 4 years than most have or will ever accomplish in 8. And when historians finish that work, they will have a record of a man who was indispensable to it all. Alongside President Donald J. Trump was Senior Advisor Jared Kushner. From the USMCA to the overhaul of the United States federal prison and criminal justice systems, to the signing of the Abraham Accords, which we will talk about today, and the unprecedented Operation Warp Speed, along with our work to secure the border along the South. There is truly no one, I believe, without the genius and the leadership that could have done more alongside our former president and vice president than Jared Kushner. But what many of you don't know, and you'll hopefully have read the book, if you haven't already bought it, go buy it and read it. It's an incredible telling of those 4 years, and really the year leading up to our first year in term one. But what many of you don't know is the kind of man that Jared is, the amount of time and hours that we spent together with our teams in the West Wing was one of the greatest experiences of my life. But it wasn't just working for the American people day in and day out and day in and day out, but it was also watching a man who put his family first, who elevated his children and his wife and respect, with such respect and such magic. It was really an incredible thing to watch. And so what I'm so excited about, again, we're here to talk about the Abraham Accords, but for the story of Jared Kushner and his leadership and his genius to be told over many, many years to come. Please help me welcome to the stage my great friend, Jared Kushner.
I do have to say, after that introduction, I'm just not going to talk because I can never live up to anything near that. So, but thank you.
It's all so true, Jared. And welcome back to Washington. It's probably a little bit of mixed feelings to be here, but I'm guessing, like our team, it's an honor to continue the work and to talk about what you were able to achieve, frankly.
Thank you. It's actually great to be back here. There's so many amazing faces and friends that I've been able to see. And before we talk about Abraham Accords or book or whatever else you want to go through, I just have to acknowledge on this anniversary just two special people who are here. Number one, Ambassador Al-Taiba and Avi Berkowitz, who really were my partners in making this happen. I'll ask you both maybe just to stand up because I tried to capture a small percentage in the book of the incredible work you guys did, but like anything that's consequential, that everyone doubts will happen, that was improbable, it really took something that could have died almost 1,000 times. It almost did, but it took trust with great people who did an incredible job, who were very, very talented. So I just want to thank you both and acknowledge you on this day before we start. So,
well, and it probably goes without saying, but you and I get to sit on the stage and take credit, but really the people that were part of the team day in and day out, who weren't on the stage, weren't in the media, didn't give press interviews, didn't write a book, they are the ones who really shepherded so much of this work. So, and you were always so great about giving people credit, which is really remarkable. So let's start. A couple of fun things we're going to talk about, but the first one, starting on a more personal note. Again, I'm so proud of you and everything that the team was able to accomplish, especially in this lane. But when you read the book, Breaking History, you talk about your professional path, your family, your faith, which is a very, very, probably your biggest characteristic that I learned being around you. And I love on page 64 of your book, you say, Trump invited us to stay the night in the Lincoln bedroom, a stately room located, page 64, a stately room located on the second floor of the White House where President Abraham Lincoln had hosted his cabinet meetings. Before we left for the balls, this was the night of the inauguration, we lit Shabbat candelabras and prayed. A member of the White House residence staff told us that it was the first time Shabbat candles had been lit in the private residence. I mean, just even thinking about that brings tears to my eyes, and I'm not even Jewish. So I think for you and your family and the extraordinary history, that had to have just been remarkable.
you know, that was a pretty emotional moment. I didn't try to fact check her because I didn't want to know if it was true or not true, but I was going to believe it. And but it was a very special moment for my life, for my wife and I. I write in the book about my grandparents who survived the Holocaust, and they basically just narrowly escaped the Nazis. They were freedom fighters and working to come. They got married in Hungary. They were in Italy in a displaced person camp for about 4 years, came to America as refugees, and then, lived the American dream and built it up. And to think that, you could go from just 2 generations from that, where they were, their family members were killed. I write about their story a little bit, to then, working with the President of the United States and being in the White House, lighting, Shabbat candles when, just 2 generations before they tried to eliminate the Jewish people. It was a very, very special experience for us.
I can't even imagine, but watching you and Ivanka and your children live out your faith, I know that so many people across the country and the world were watching you, and we're so proud of really who you were and what you stood for. And I know that probably animated, I'm assuming, a lot of your work with the Abraham Accords and with the Middle East peace process. You talk a lot in your book about breaking history, breaking paradigms, starting from scratch. And I'd love, just for the audience, for you to walk through that. I mean, just almost from the beginning when everyone said that your approach was crazy and dumb and you didn't know what you were doing, to today where we're celebrating 2 years in of what was an extraordinary achievement.
So when I left government, a lot of people would ask, how did it occur? And to be honest, there were a lot of people I would see who would have like a very quick line to say it, but I couldn't really describe it because it was a series of a lot of different learnings and a lot of different people coming together that enabled us ultimately to make the breakthrough. Yusuf actually describes it, Ambassador Al-Taiba, in the best way, where he says you had the right people in the right places at the right time, working together, trusting each other. And that really extended from our leaders, right? President Trump, Mohammed bin Zayed, Bibi Netanyahu, all of them really put us in the right position to do it. And I think that for me, what I write about in the book is that how it was a journey. So the first year, because I had no experience in diplomacy, I think that was both an asset and a liability, right? And what I did is for the first year, I really was trying to meet with all the people who'd worked on it before and try to get their perspective. And what I found was that people may have thought once I got going that I was doing it the wrong way, but I was pretty convinced that they were all doing it the wrong way. And I think that they had achieved a very similar result, which is by constantly going back to the same issues in the same ways, they constantly were failing. And so what we did is we listened to people. We saw, how do we look at the situation for what it is today? Let's focus on what are the common interests, what's possible. But fundamentally, I believe that people get put into positions where they're apart, but when people are together, they tend to agree and want to understand each other. And, between Israel and the Muslim countries, one of the biggest problems was that there was a lot of historical, I wouldn't use the word indoctrination per se, but there was a historical understanding or grievance that was passed down, but there wasn't the channel for people to have connection between each other to truly understand where they have commonality. And if I have to say that the Abraham Accords, I think, has done amazing things from a national security point of view for America, for the world. But what I get the most satisfaction out of is seeing people from Israel, from the Arab world, come together, meet each other, have dinner together, do business together, talk together. And I think that what it's doing is it's lowering that hostility, which has really existed now for over 70 years in the region, which is leading to the restoration of Jews and Muslims and Christians all being able to live in harmony in that region, which is something that I think is very, very positive for the world.
You write on that note that for decades, even this is the beginning of chapter 13, Great Expectations. For decades, even the most seasoned foreign policy experts had failed to broker peace in the Middle East. These experts were skeptical that I could succeed where they had repeatedly failed. What chance did a 36-year-old real estate investor have? I understood that the probability of success was slim, but I was determined to search for a breakthrough. I told myself that the worst that could happen was that I would just fail like everyone else. So walk us through what that was like. I mean, the ups and the downs, and then ultimately just the courage and the heart to see it through.
I'd like to make it a bigger thing, than it actually was, but it was very simple. The President of the United States asked me to do a job, and in doing it, you just have to figure out how to do it the best you can, and you have different ways to do it. And I would see people in government approach problems differently. One is they would say, this is likely to fail. Let me start figuring out how to blame it on somebody else and explain why it wasn't that I failed. It was just that the problem was too hard or this person's bad. Or you can say, let me give this the best shot at trying to succeed. And I think that what we did here is we basically said, okay, there's probably like 1,000 ways to fail, and there's probably maybe like 1 or 2 ways to make a breakthrough, even though, sometimes we doubted even that there was, 1 or 2 ways. I mean, the president would always joke that solving Middle East peace was like a cliche, as like the thing that just could never happen. And so what we did is we basically said, if we're going to do it, let's give it everything we had. And it really took us just, eliminating the noise. Again, a lot of people were saying we weren't qualified, which they weren't unjustified in saying. And then as we did things differently, nobody had probed or tried those things before. So we were in a lot of uncharted territory, and in a region where there'd been a lot of wars, a lot of death, a lot of conflict. What people thought was that if you did this thing, it would lead to the world exploding. And I write about in the book about how President Trump decided to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And I take people in the Situation Room and into those discussions and into people's fears. And it was a very intense decision that was made. But when that happened, we worked with all of our friends in the region to say, look, we understand you may not agree with us, but we want to see that we can work together in different ways. And what happened was President Trump made the decision. The next morning, the sun rose. The next evening, the sun set, and life moved on. Same thing happened again with pulling out of the Iran deal. And people said, if you do this, it's going to lead to World War III. It's going to be a disaster. And by the way, these weren't like just binary yes or no decisions President Trump made. There was thoughtful policy process. There was disagreement. One thing that I actually think, again, they write about Lincoln's team of rivals and how he had different people around, and they celebrate that. One thing with Trump, people would say, oh, it's chaotic because people disagree with each other in the White House. I thought that was a strength of the president, that he constantly wanted people around him who had strong points of view. And so this way, sometimes he let them fight it out. Sometimes it was private. Sometimes it would leak to the press a little bit. But what it did was it gave him the right ability to press all the positions and make the decisions. So he did the same thing with Iran, and I think that also showed. When it came time to move forward with a lot of the work, we just said that as long as we were doing things that were rational, were logical, and were pointing out what we thought were the right foundational elements for peace, then we said it was worth doing it. And we were very lucky that a lot of our friends in the region worked with us to try to do that. And so fundamentally, I believe that the job of a government is to provide security for their population so that they can have economic opportunity and the ability to fulfill their potential and to make the best lives for themselves. And so we created a set of situations where we were putting the different leaders in a prism. When we came into the job, everyone said the Middle East, it's really about Sunni, Shia divides. When I got in, I saw a very clear divide that was much different than how the conventional people thought, which is I said there's 2 different leaders in the Middle East. People who want to give their people better lives and give their people opportunity, and then people who are trying to justify their existence based on some religious perversion or some, scapegoating of somebody else. And so that was really the fundamental divide. And what we saw was that if peace were to occur, it has to be about the future, not about, a grievance from the past. And it has to be about getting people to focus on their interests and how they can make their lives better and their family lives better by doing things that people hadn't done before. And so by doing that, we were fortunate to have great partners. And again, I write about this a lot in the book because it wasn't a very simple process, but I joke that we accomplished it on plan C, but only because we went through the alphabet 3 times, failing at every letter. And then we kept learning from each thing that went wrong and then iterated and were just determined. As long as the president said this was a job, we had to keep going. We weren't going to turn the engine off.
Well, I think that's really well said. And while I didn't have the opportunity or honor to work on this project with you, we did work on a lot of other projects together. And in many ways, it was a very similar model that you just couldn't give up. And I do think in a way that made our administration a little bit different. We all came from outside, for the most part, outside the box. And so figuring out how to solve these issues. But I know that the time, people would always say, what's the hardest thing in the White House? And I would always say, it's not having enough time. And I remember something you had said very similar to that while we were working together. And then in your book, you actually get into that. You say, few would even know all the heated conversations, agonizing decisions, and sweet moments of victory that occurred within these walls, the West Wing. I picked up the last 2 items I had left until the very end. The mezuzah on the doorway. Did I say that correctly? Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm a small town girl from Texas, y'all. You'll have to forgive the mispronunciations. And then also an hourglass that our friend Chris Liddell had given to you. You say, as I prepared to leave the White House for the final time, I thought about what Liddell has said, that every day here is sand through an hourglass and we have to make it count. I knew I had lived by those words. I never forgot that my office wasn't really my office. I was just the current inhabitant. From the day we arrived, I never stopped working, and I can attest to that. My responsibility was to give every ounce of energy I had to help the president advance his vision for the American people. Talk to us a little bit about what that was like and what really a day for you, moving through multiples of different policy lanes and issues, but obviously the Abraham Accords, I would guess, being the very top of that list. But what that was like for you and your family and how you prioritized all those issues.
So what I would say, number one, is that when you're in the White House, you have tremendous ability to impact things. And I remember actually in 2009, I was invited to the White House with a bunch of young entrepreneurs during the great, recession as it was going on. And we were all very excited to be there. And we thought we were going to give input. And I think we met with somebody in like the EOB who maybe had never met the president before. And it was, it was like a big group of us. And we were, but I remember it was a big day going to the White House, right? I told my mom, I told my grandma. And so I realized that everyone coming to the White House has an opportunity for you to impact the policy they're working on, maybe in a way that no other meeting they're going to have in their week or their year or their lifetime could. And so I made sure that we always gave people the experience of what they wanted, in the sense that, and maybe it's thinking like a business person, which is every meeting you do, and you're doing meetings every 30 minutes, is let's figure out doable, not doable, give quick no's if it's not going to happen, but if it's yes, follow up, be efficient, and do your best to get as much done as possible. And I think that we were transactional in how we thought about our policies, right? In the sense that what were we getting for America, what were we doing for other countries, and how do we advance those interests? But we were very much focused on, let's do everything we can do that's positive in every minute we have. And I realized that, I also write about in the book a lot of the investigations and the attacks and what it was like to be in that environment. But I realized that in Washington, it's kind of like a time duration game, right? In the sense that you have to accomplish everything you can while you have the opportunity. And the other side is doing everything they can to either frustrate you, distract you, stall you, and the media's around trying to get you to be distracted and chase rabbits all the time. And you have to figure out, how do you keep your eye on the prize and get there? And so from a family point of view, it's hard. You say, oh, I want to take my son to his Little League game. And then the phone's ringing. You're saying, well, I'm supposed to be with my kids. But you're saying, well, it's not like it's a world matter of importance. So, well, actually, it's a leader of a country, who maybe has a problem. You got to pick it up. And so, for 4 years, you never had the ability to turn it off. But we never saw it as a burden. We saw it as an opportunity, because there was so much that we could have gotten done. And even with the Middle East, we always said, okay, well, do we take this next trip? If we do, a lot of people, kind of wished we would have stopped pushing, right? Because they kind of thought we were foolish a little bit by saying, nothing's ever going to happen. It's, it's kind of cute that you guys keep pushing to, get everyone to focus on this. And I think a lot of people wanted us to stop because they thought maybe we were wasting our time. And maybe we were, I don't know. But I think that that's really the opportunity. And I think if there's one lesson that we can all take today on the anniversary of the Abraham Accords from this, is that we don't have to accept things as they are if we think that things can be better. And I think that that's what it was, because all it took here was a small group of people who were empowered by their leadership to believe that something larger and better could be, and they worked their butts off in order to achieve it against great odds, against great resistance. But they found a way, and it would have been very easy for us to, have more dinner parties or spend more time with our families and not get things done. But we knew that we had an amazing opportunity, and we did everything we could to make sure that we did that. And today we see the fruits of that, which is, again, in America, I think that there's still, a lot of Trump derangement syndrome, which I think they're starting to do clinical trials on some remedies for. But I think that because of that, they've refused. I mean, the incoming administration, or the current administration, it took them a year to really call it by its name, and I think now they've embraced it because they see how good it is, and that's because it was enduring in the region and something that's really been so celebrated, embraced, and I think that people don't want to be a part. I think maybe there's something we can learn about that for the division we have in our country today too, which is that now that there's a mechanism for, Arabs and Jews to get together and have discussions, people are running through that window, not wanting to stay in their camps. And so I do think it's a very exciting time in the Middle East in that regard. I think that, if you won't go back to 2016, ISIS had a caliphate the size of Ohio. The Iran deal was just done, which gave $150 billion. They were using that money to fund the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. Syria was in a civil war where 500,000 people were basically killed. Yemen was unstable. Libya was unstable. And all of America's allies had felt very betrayed. You fast forward now, 5, 6 years forward, now it's one of the most exciting regions in the world. Economically, it's doing phenomenally well. It's more integrated than ever. The young generation that we were worried about being radicalized by the extremists is now being inspired by their leadership to build startup companies and to figure out how to make the region and the world much better. So I do think that, again, paradigms can shift, but it takes people with courage willing to and determination willing to stick with it in order to make that happen.
That's really well said. And something you said at the beginning reminded me when you said it, the way we worked to ensure that people coming into the White House felt included in the process and that we understood that they were a big value add for the most part. It reminded me of the very first time I met you. And I was invited in to be part of a discussion on criminal justice reform. And you sat to the left. There were probably 20 of us in the room in the Eisenhower building. And I'll never forget because you walked in. You weren't always on time, but that day you were on time. You sat down. You had a yellow notepad. And for 1 hour, you just listened and took notes. And without really even saying much, you just listened to every person in the room and what they had to say and what they could bring to the table, including I was one of those. And I was really blown away. And really, I think that's when I became such a big Jared Kushner fan, because I realized that you weren't really in it for certainly the fancy office and getting your name in the media, et cetera, that in fact you really were there to try to make a difference. And seeing the seriousness and the purpose with which you approached every single one of the lanes that you worked in was really remarkable and really inspiring. So having been on the other end of your approach, I can really appreciate it and say that it really worked.
Well, what I'll say to that is at the end of that meeting, we said, let's all meet up again. We came up with what we thought next steps were, and we said, let's meet up again in 30 days in order to start putting the plan that we kind of had sketched out in that meeting together. And Brooke said, why 30 days? We could be here next week. And I said, you are literally the first person I've met who I've been in Washington with who's come back with a more aggressive deadline than I was setting. So I knew I liked her.
That's a true story.
And then that's when I started the recruitment process to say we need her help on the inside. And obviously what you've done with AFPI and what you did in the White House and what you're continuing to do is with the same urgency and the same intelligence and the same impact. So very, very grateful for that. And I do want to say, if you have more questions, we can do that. But I also do want to just make one moment just to mention Rob and the team at AFPI and the team at the Abraham Accords Institute for Peace, who really have done just tremendous work, doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that all of these new relationships between the governments when the Trump administration left was continued to form. One of the things that was so remarkable to me when the Abraham Accords occurred was that you couldn't make phone calls from the countries. You couldn't wire money between the countries. And President Trump does, a phone call with Mohammed bin Zayed and with Bibi Netanyahu. And we put out a statement and we say, okay, well now what happens now, right? And it was pretty unprecedented. And we didn't realize, how the Israelis and the Emiratis had to kind of learn to work with each other. And there was just a lot of things that needed to happen. And so we got a lot of those things done thanks to a lot of great partners. And then the same thing happened with Morocco, with Sudan, with Bahrain. But then, obviously Rob and his team have done an incredible job, working to connect those wires and really to bring this forward and to find avenues for the positivity to be accelerated even more. So I'm very grateful for the work you've done. And I just have to acknowledge Ambassador O'Brien, who really was such a strong supporter and enabler of so much of the work we were doing. Again, none of it would have happened without him, and just very, very grateful. And also just Ambassador Ricolta and Ambassador Fisher, who are here as well, who are really just the eyes and ears on the ground and fixing so many problems that you'll never hear of because they were fixed, because we had very competent, committed people doing it. So I just want to throw this out. There's probably 1,000 more people I should thank as well, but I know we don't have endless time. So.
Well, I know that they appreciate that, and for those that were not thanked, I know that the appreciation continues. So let's wrap up with this, and then we'll move to our panel. So today marks the second anniversary of the Accords, and you've touched on this a little bit, but just sort of to wrap it up nicely, how have the Accords fared in the last 2 years? And clearly, looking back, it was a remarkable, monumental achievement. But I would suggest or think that your thought is really it is just the beginning. And what do you see moving forward as the real promise and opportunity here?
So one of the things, when you're in Washington, you're trying to get everything done. And again, my job was so multi-topic that now that I'm out and I wrote the book and you get a chance to reflect, you say what was real and what was fleeting, right? So there was a lot of things we did that got overturned right away. But there's a lot of things we did that were either embraced or that have been enduring regardless. And so when I think about our prison reform and criminal justice reform, that's been fully embraced. It was bipartisan. It's enduring. When I think about the trade deals, I have to acknowledge Ambassador Lighthizer here, who really was one of my best friends and great mentors in the administration, who taught me a lot about trade, about life, about so many things. But those trade deals have been fully embraced by both sides. Still a couple people maybe a little angry you did too good of a job, but that's another story. But when I think about the Abraham Accords, what's been so satisfying to me is that they've been very enduring and embraced fairly globally in a very big way. And so the recognition that they've gotten is worthwhile. I think that we're still at the very early phases of figuring out what the potential can be between the Israeli people and the different countries that have embraced it. The biggest revelation, I write about this in the book about a dinner I had with the Sultan of Oman, and it was an incredible dinner. It's a lot of very funny stories in there, which you could all read. But he said one thing to me that really stuck with me, where he said, I feel badly for the Palestinian people that they carry the burden with them of the Muslim world. And I kind of said, wait, who the hell elected these incompetent negotiators to negotiate for the Muslim world on the Al-Aqsa Mosque? And what I saw from different focus groups that we did in Amman and Cairo and Ramallah was basically that the Muslim population viewed the conflict with Israel through the eyes of not being allowed to have access to the mosque. So I think that if you look at a lot of the propaganda for ISIS or a lot of the jihadist groups who are recruiting, they say, we have to go and destroy Israel, or you have to come and be a jihadist because we're fighting to save the mosque. But the mosque is open, right? Israel's agreed to that for a long time. Even in the peace proposal we put forward, they agreed that the King of Jordan should be able to retain the custodianship of the mosque. And now we're finally starting to have Muslims from throughout the world travel through Dubai to go and visit the mosque, and that is very, very exciting because they put it on Instagram, they put it on Facebook, and people are saying, wait, we thought that we weren't allowed to pray there. We thought this was under attack. Well, it's free, it's open, and I think that that's a very important thing towards lowering the propaganda that's been put out over the last 70 plus years. But with regards to where it goes, is I think the biggest disappointment so far is that more countries haven't been brought into it. And I think that we had about 6 active discussions that we had going on. I think that there's a lot more to build on. But again, I do hope that the current administration will focus on that and work to do that, because once the whole Arab-Israeli conflict is over, I think that you will have an era of prosperity and peacefulness in that region that will endure for a very, very long time.
Please help me thank a true visionary, Jared Kushner. All right, now I'd like to invite our panelists up. Here at AFPI, we like to do things very efficiently. So while I am introducing them, we're also going to be moving chairs up to the stage. So forgive the little bit of background, but to keep things moving along. First, I'd love to introduce the Honorable Robert O'Brien, who got a shout out, serving as the 27th National Security Advisor from 2019 to 2021, where his tenure included amazing things, including greater cooperation around the world, but of course the signing of the Abraham Accords. Previously, I'm sure you all know, he served as the Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs and was directly involved in the return of 25 detainees and hostages back home to the United States. Please help me welcome National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. Would you sit right there? Yeah, perfect. Honorable John Ricolta, currently chairman of the Walbridge Group, but previously served as the United States Ambassador to the UAE and also the Commissioner General of Expo Dubai 2020, which featured over 30,000 events over the course of 180 days, including 24 million visits. One of our brightest stars in the Trump administration. Please help me welcome the Honorable John Ricolta. speaking of stars, but this time on the basketball court, Coach Bruce Pearl. We have with us, all the way from Auburn University, the head coach of the Auburn Tigers men's basketball team. I love it. How great is this? We have all these sort of ambassadors and national security advisors, and then Coach Pearl, is so good to have you. Really, really great to have you. But his background in this is deep. He realized a lifelong dream in the summer of 2008 when his country called upon him to serve as the head coach of the Maccabi USA's Open men's basketball team at the 18th World Games in Israel. He led the American squad to the gold medal for the third time in just 24 years, toppling the favored Israel in the titled game. He just returned literally in the last couple of days, Coach, from leading the inaugural Birthright for College basketball tour in Israel, and has recently begun speaking about an Abraham Accords Cup to take place between Israel and signatory nations of the Abraham Accords. Coach Bruce Pearl, everyone. And my great friend and the newest addition to the America First Policy Institute, the Honorable Carla Sands, who leads our AFPI Center for Energy and the Environment with Governor Rick Perry. Of course, she just finished a very spicy U.S. Senate run in Pennsylvania, where she was such a great and eloquent speaker on behalf of America First ideas, and how great we are and grateful we are to have her. Obviously, in the last administration, she served as the United States ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands, and is just a remarkable leader for everything that we all believe in. So please help me welcome Ambassador Carla Sands. And finally, our moderator, the Honorable Rob Greenway, currently President and CEO of the Abraham Accords Peace Institute. He previously served as Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director of the National Security Council's Middle East and North African Affairs. In that role, he implemented sanctions against Iran, was instrumental in the removal of Soleimani and Baghdadi and the defeat of ISIS, and was part of the team that negotiated the historic Abraham Accords. Please help me welcome our esteemed panel.
Thanks, everyone, very much. I appreciate our hosts at America First, the teams at both America First and the Abraham Accords Peace Institute for the work to make today a reality, and also to our distinguished guests and all of those in attendance here physically and virtually. We'll dive in because time is precious and we've got a lot of ground to cover, and we're fortunate in being blessed with distinguished guests in order to do it. Even if you don't get our monthly newsletter, and I hope that you do, I think it's been plain to all that the progress made by the Abraham Accords members in the past 2 years has been extraordinary. That was, of course, the expectation, but there is a tremendous amount of work that lies in front of us, as was discussed earlier. I think what we'd appreciate from our panel members today is their insight into what we can expect based on their diverse fields and expertise and their long-term exposure to the region. And so there's been progress, but I guess, again, the potential here is what we'd like to spend our time on. Our first question goes to Ambassador Sands, and will relate to the field of energy. Israeli companies Enlight and NewMed announced a plan last month just to jointly develop, fund, build, and manage renewable energy projects across the Middle East and North Africa, including Morocco, the Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. Last year, Mubadala Petroleum signed a deal with Israel's Delek Petroleum, forging a partnership in the Eastern Mediterranean. How can the Accords members build on the collaboration begun to develop critical solutions to European markets struggling to overcome the loss of Russian gas following their invasion of Ukraine? Ambassador.
Well, thank you for the question. It's an important one. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. So they've had a hot war there for a long time. This should come as no surprise to any of us. But now we have the tremendous escalation and the crisis for energy for the EU that's unprecedented. In most of our lifetimes, we haven't seen such a terrible situation. And certainly American natural gas can be part of the answer to this crisis for the EU. But I think we should also look at the Eastern Mediterranean. You know, they've discovered just not that long ago the Zohr, the Leviathan, the Tamar, and the Aphrodite fields. And this natural gas exploration between just Cyprus and Israel is capable of replacing about 20% of what Russia was supplying to the EU. They're capable of supplying up to 25 billion cubic meters per year to the EU. So that's exciting. But there are more potentials even undiscovered in the region. And we're having some obstacles in integrating the Abraham Accord members into the global energy markets. Part of the problem is the United States and Europe are reluctant to view natural gas as a long-term, sustainable solution to meet the demands that Europe has. But we know natural gas is cheap, it's plentiful, and it's abundant, and it's clean. It's for years, the harvesting and transport of natural gas and energy has been unfairly scrutinized as financial institutions have worked to diversify